Afternoon, everybody, and hello from Limerick City. Uh, it's 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 nice to come on and talk about change because it's such a big topic at the moment, given that we are all in a real state of flux. And what I'm looking at today is the difference between managing and leading change, and they are two very different things, and that's important to understand. I'm going to look at very briefly at the idea of managing change, but then I'm going to spend a lot more time talking about leading it and developing the skills needed to lead, especially in the current chaos. Just offline there, Brian and I were talking, and I was saying how I'm describing the current situation as being told, just being dropped into the middle of the ocean and being told, swim for land. And most of us, or all of us, don't know what direction to even start swimming. And when you do start swimming, you hope that you reach land before you get too tired and drown. And that's a little bit like the way we are at the moment, that we're hoping that we can find land before we get too tired, or in our case, I suppose it's our businesses run out of cash. But also along the way, we have to worry about all the other things that go alongside cash. And the biggest one, I believe, is people. Because without them, you really don't have anything. And I think in the middle of all this madness, we forget sometimes that there are real lives affected beyond our own. We did some work in Ingenium a few weeks back with 20 countries. So we had organizations in 20 countries who were working. And we had the leadership from the 20 countries. And it was amazing to see that everybody in the globe has fairly much the same concerns. And that's an important thing to point out, is that especially when you're maybe a small business owner, you can feel very isolated and alone. But the truth of the matter is that we're all in this same boat together, and what you're feeling in terms of worry, stress, anxiety is being felt by people globally, and no matter what size their company is, they're feeling it. So I think that's important to point out too, that you're not alone, you're not the only one. And in that, because that is the situation, I think collectively we have a better chance of getting it. Now, what I want to look at today is, I said, managing and leading change. And as Brian said, if you've got queries or questions, just ask them, and I'll stop periodically just to check the file, and if they're in, I'll deal with them. And feel free to challenge where you like. You see on this opening slide, I've put up the burning platform. And the idea here was, as you know, that anyone who has studied change to any degree before will know that the theory of change means that for change to happen, you have to have a burning platform, i.e., you're standing on a platform that's about to collapse if you don't do something quickly. And that is the catalyst for change. And in this situation, we have one hell of a burning platform. And every company in the world is standing on the platform, with the exception of a few outliers who are doing very well at the moment. Change normally comes about through internal and external factors. And just let's look at those for a moment. And what I would put in here first in the external was, well, I put in medical recently because obviously this is a medical factor that's after causing all this. But generally you see political factors. So you could imagine the difference in policy, that if Fine Gael were in power versus a Sinn Féin-led government, it would be obviously very different political policies. Economics will obviously determine the change within your company. So go back to 2008, and that was a major economic external shock. Then you're looking at socio-cultural, technological, environmental, legal. And I'll come back to life in a moment. On the other side, internally, change is normally brought about by a new leader. So a CEO comes in to take over a company, and they want to do things their way versus the old way. And sometimes they change just for change's sake, which is never a clever thing to do. But other times it's a new broom and they have new ideas, and that happens. Strategically positioning, and many of us will be thinking about that actually at the moment in terms of where does our company going to be. So we may have written a new strategy, only you may have written it at the end of 2019. It's kind of thrown out the window now that the current reality is so different. So we may have to think about repositioning ourselves. Culture is often a problem because, you know, the adage that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, it does. And if you might have the best strategy in the world and a new leader comes in with a lovely attitude, a lovely strategy, but the culture is maybe dangerous and you know, it can be very negative. So obviously there will have to be some big changes if the culture needs to change to realign to your strategy, which realigns to your organization. Restructuring, new services, automation, all normal stuff. But the one on the other side here is life. And I think sometimes we forget that. And I give an example where I remember dealing with a client before who was leading a change process and thought he was really doing, and he was doing a good job of explaining everything to everyone and getting them bought in. But there was one person in particular that just didn't seem to react or didn't seem to care. Anyway, the long and the short of it, what it was that the person he was talking to, who was normally a very good and engaged employee, their wife had cancer. So that's the end of that discussion. So it doesn't really matter what's going on in the company and how great the CEO's plans are. This man his mind is elsewhere, and rightly so. And that is what I'm trying to get at in this, is that leading change is different to managing change. Managing change is following a process in a very transactional manner. But leading change is understanding people and understanding what's going on in their world. And right now, people are at home. A lot of people who have never been unemployed before are now sitting at home looking at the wall. So it's a major, major shock for them, and there's a lot of stress and anxiety. And you as a leader of your organization or as a manager within your organization have to understand that and have to take the time to lead them. We'll look at that in a moment. This next slide, I want to just look at, I'm not going to labor on Darwin, because anytime you talk about change, Darwin is pushed out. And to be fair, it's because it comes from his theory of his theory of evolution. And over the years, the macho-ness of the business community has turned Darwin's theory of evolution into something else. And now we hear the strongest survive and the fittest survive and all this stuff. And it's not that. It's the most adaptable survive, as we know. And that is what you're going to see at the moment. The companies that can adapt quickly in this new world are the ones that are going to live. The ones that, unless they have major, major cash flow, will not be able to adapt. The bigger ones that maybe have big cash flow but can't adapt, it'll be interesting to see how they respond. But these companies here are ones that were huge brands. Now, there's one up there, obviously, Tesco, which is still a very, very big brand, and you might wonder why it's there, and I'll come back to that in a moment. But the other five were big brands, in particular in the 90s. So if you take the two in the middle, Nokia and Sharp. Nokia, we all had one, and we all played Snake for hours on end in the 90s because that's all we had. And then Sharp was a huge brand that, you know, if you remember the 90s and if you were a follower of Premier League football, they were the sponsor of Man United. Nokia are effectively gone now, and Sharp are still there, but they're not the brand they were anymore because the world has changed. And then look at Extravision and Kodak, Blockbuster. There was a time, I know, in Limerick City that Extravision seemed to be on nearly every street corner. Now we're limited to one kiosk in one part of Limerick where you can go out and just hire DVDs because the world changes. The reason Tesco are on it is because Tesco, as we know, are a giant. But when Aldi and Lidl came into the market, they completely changed the retail grocery trade. And Tesco were so big, they found it very hard to turn the ship and take on Aldi and deal with Aldi and the loss of market share to Aldi and Lidl. They brought in a new CEO who's now left, and they have started to turn Tesco around. It's not fully there yet, but it's getting there. But it's just an important thing to point out that a beast like Tesco, which seemed like such a giant, when something comes in that disrupts their market, even a beast like Tesco can struggle to turn around and take a long time to turn around. Whereas I think many people that may be on this call are in companies that are smaller and much more adaptable. And that is a big, big bonus. So that's a good thing to keep in our heads. These are just models of change. I don't want to spend time looking at them because you can these slides are available after it, so you can look at them yourself if you haven't seen it. But the one on the left, which is the 3-step, that's Lewin's model of change. And that's basically you unfreeze, you change, you refreeze. It's a very simplistic model, but it is basically that this is the current status quo. You unfreeze it, you change what needs to be changed, and then you refreeze it, and that is the new status quo. But that's far too simple. What you really need to see is an expansion of that, and then you have a 5-step, and you've Cotter's 8-step model, which again build on all of this. But there's one I want to talk about, which is one that we looked at ourselves within Ingenium, and this was the idea of CAFOS. And I would strongly advise any of you that are going through change at the moment, use this as a model because it's a very clever, and I'll spend a moment on it if you don't mind. The phases I want to focus on in this are cognizance and appetite. Now, these are critical steps, and these need to be done really well because, and you would think that maybe, well, cognizance means I understand why I need to change. The appetite being, have I got the guts to take on this change and make those hard decisions? You would think they're obvious parts of a plan. They're not. And a lot of companies end up going down the road of getting into fact-finding and operationalizing change before they've actually worked out what the problem is. I've been involved in companies in the past as the CEO. When I came in, the board have asked me to make X, Y, and Z. They've advised me that they think that X, Y, and Z changes need to make. I remember one in particular where they wanted me to remove the sales team of an organization. And when I went under the bonnet, the problem wasn't the sales team at all. Yes, sales numbers weren't looking great, but actually new customers were coming in all the time. The problem was we were losing them on the other end because the operational side of the business wasn't working effectively. So the sales team were breaking their necks all over the place trying to bring in new business, and were doing it, but they weren't looked after when they got in. Imagine getting rid of that sales team. What would have happened was the company would have just completely folded because you wouldn't have had the people bringing in the business in the first place, and we would have still been hemorrhaging on the other side. So instead, we ended up changing the operational side. Now, there's just a very simple example of some companies think they know what the problem is, but they don't understand it truly, so they would have made a mistake. And I think a lot of companies sit in that bracket from my own experience. So what I would suggest is that you strongly research what really is the problem. All of us have biases that we bring with us all the time. You may not like a certain person in your organization because they challenge you. So you think, I'll take them out at the first opportunity. So in your head now you're thinking, maybe they're the problem. And maybe they're not. Maybe it's something else. So really take the time to think, what is the problem? Talk to the right people and really do a warts and all analysis on your company and on yourself, because a lot of times the boss is the problem. You may have a very strong emotional attachment to a company, and the way you run it is the way you've always run it, and the way you always will run it. Well, that's not a change mindset. And if that is your mindset, when the world changes, you're the one that's causing the problem. So look at yourself critically in the two. Once you have worked out what the problem is, you move into appetite stage. So now you see what the problem is and what the big challenge is going to be. The next thing is you have to ask yourself, have you the guts to take on that challenge? Do you want to take on that challenge? That may involve redundancies. Do you want to have those conversations with people? If you don't, well, maybe you're the wrong person to lead the challenge. And again, you have to reflect on that. Or maybe there's people around you who haven't got the appetite that you have. And does that mean you move them on and bring in new people to help you? Because there's no point going down the road of making a change across a big organization if the people that are supposed to be your right and left-hand man and woman are not on the same team as you. And it ends up becoming more of a problem for you. So you have to ensure that what's around you has the appetite to take on the challenge. Once you've got a green light in those two phases, now you can move into the change management process, which is now you find the real facts. You find the stats, you find the details of every department in the company, and you make a plan for every department to come out the other side. You operationalize that by putting KPIs and measuring them. A lot of people forget to measure them, and it all sounds well. We do our strategic renewal. We've changed the way we do business, and then 2 months later, it's back to the same old rigmarole because the people at the top don't enforce it. And once it's operationalized, you sustain it and you embed it. And the reason that CAPOS is circular, because then you're back to the start again. Change is cyclical and it's constant. It's the only constant in life, is that we're going to see change constantly. It just happens that the speed of it changes from time to time. The pandemic has brought it on almost in an instant. Other change is slow. But if you think that just because you finished this one strategic rule or this one change process that you're done, you're not. So you need to go back to the start and look at your business again and plan for the next period of time. Now we move on to leading change, and I wanted to focus on people's resistance. So in every change process, there is going to be a lot of resistance, and it's down to basically people naturally don't like change. None of us get up in the morning and actually want to change, or very few of us. I was speaking to an economist here in the university in Limerick who spoke about how one morning he got up early, went down to his kitchen and turned the breakfast table from facing in one direction and basically turning it 90 degrees. So it now was facing across the room. And he just got on with his making breakfast. His wife and kids came down and they saw that the breakfast table was changed into a 90-degree direction. And he said the chaos and pandemonium that happened in the kitchen that morning because of such a small change, because what you were expecting wasn't what you actually saw. And I thought that's a very, very good example of people's attitude to change Why is that after happening? And why is it affecting my life? I didn't ask for it. That's normal, and we all have it. When you look at the resistance to change, there's a few things we need to look at here. The first red ones, I want to come back to those. I want to speak about the blue ones for a moment, because they're more general. The ones in red, I think, are more relevant in the current climate. The first one is the inconvenience of it. Sometimes changing working hours, for example, or look at where the healthcare workers are having to worry about childcare because, you know, they have to go to work, but the creches are closed. There's a huge inconvenience around change. And a simple one that I've seen in the past, which caused uproar, was a company wanted to change the starting time from 9 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, they thought they were doing everybody a favor because traffic would be lighter so people could come into work quicker. But a lot of people were affected because kids couldn't be dropped off to schools that early, so how are they going to manage that? So it caused a lot of inconvenience, and that needs to be remembered again. You sitting in your office making these decisions on other people's lives, it's easy to look at it through your eyes only. You have to step back and look at it through their eyes. So there's an inconvenience there. There's a threat to influence. So sometimes when a company is being restructured or reorganized, people think, well, I used to have 10 people reporting to me, now I've only got 7. Does that mean I'm less important? Or maybe they're reported directly to you as the boss. Now there's someone else in the middle. Does that mean they're no longer at the level of influence? And that's, again, you can see it. It's our ego. It's normal. Resentment of control is linked to that. So i.e., you may not feel you have the same amount of decision-making power as you had before. It hurts your ego more than anything. And sometimes you just don't agree with the change that's being made. So again, CEO comes in, he or she tells you this is the way that the company's going to be, and you just don't agree with it. So that is another source of resistance. But on the other side, the ones in red are the ones I think are very, very problematic at the moment. Up at the top, insecurity. Now, I think everybody has some form of insecurity within themselves at the moment, no matter who you are, because there is so much chaos in front of us that if I went back to my ocean analogy, you're dropped in the ocean and you're told find land and you don't even know where to start. That is that's a very hard place to be. And it means that we are insecure. Yet the people on this call are probably decision makers. So we probably have more knowledge about what's going to happen within our own company than those maybe that you've had to leave off temporarily and are at home, or those that are still working in your company and are looking to you for answers. So whatever insecurity you feel, imagine what the people around you feel. There may be a lack of trust. Again, if you're involved in an organization which has maybe made promises to your staff in the past and hasn't maybe fulfilled those promises, and now you're asking them to trust you that you'll be okay and you'll get through this, that may not be as simple in this case because trust takes a long time to build up, but it's very easy to destroy. And there may be just a lack of trust in your organization. And when you're going through this process, the one thing I would say is don't bull people because they'll see through it very, very quickly. I think if you're honest with them from the very start, and sometimes it's okay, it's always okay to say, I don't know, if you don't know. But if you try and tell them that the world is going to be full of sunshine and flowers, and then it doesn't end up that way, your credibility is destroyed and they'll never trust you again. So I think being honest from the start is critical. Incomplete information is dangerous. You can do your best and you can give over as much information as you possibly can based on what you know. And there are things within a company, as we all know, that we can't tell employees because you have to keep it to yourself. But the problem is when Chinese whisper starts and one employee says to the other, I heard this, or she told me that, and the other person, well, she didn't say that to me. And all these cross rumors start happening. It's very important that you're consistent with your messaging as much as you can. And sometimes, unfortunately, in the world we live in now, where social media plays such a role in delivering news and opinions, where people who aren't experts all of a sudden think they are, that's even more dangerous. And you as a boss have to understand that people are going to read articles online and they'll become the truth because they'll think they're true. And then that's coming back on top of you. So it's very important that your communication is consistent. You're saying the right things and you're saying the same thing to everybody and not bits and pieces to other people. And then finally, economic losses. And that's on everyone's mind at the moment. I'm sure everybody on this call, unless you're within the public sector, you're probably thinking, is my company going to be okay? Am I going to have to take a pay cut? How is this going to impact on us? The majority of people's Christmas bonuses are probably gone up in smoke right now. I'm already actually getting queries from my staff about their Christmas bonus. And you're thinking to yourself, you're talking about a Christmas bonus, and I'm thinking, how am I going to ensure that we're still alive at Christmas? So it just shows you where people's thoughts can be. So how do we overcome this? And I'm sorry I haven't stopped for questions. I can't see the questions on my screen. I thought I could at the moment, but I'll try and get to them at the end anyway. So how do we overcome this resistance and try and bring some calmness to this chaos? The first thing I want to point out is you will be remembered when all this is gone, when COVID's gone and we're back to somewhat whatever the new normal will be. You will be remembered for how you treated your people, not by how well you implemented a 5-step or an 8-step or whatever change process you decide to implement. And that's important. Nobody will pat you in the back and say, you know what, you managed the operationalization side of that, of step 4 of CAFOS so well. They won't, but they will remember how you treated them and how you made them feel during this process. And that will give you such credibility as a leader of your organization going forward. The first thing, open the big one in the corner. I have 4 bullet points there. The first one is stay calm. These have to be applied right throughout the process. Stay calm. If you as the leader or as a team leader or as a manager or whatever you are, panic and start rabbiting on to your staff about, it's a bit like chicken licking, the sky is falling down here. It's game over, because if the boss panics, everyone panics. So even if you are nervous, you have to try and stay calm on the outside and tell people it's going to be okay. But go back to what I said a moment ago. It's not about being optimistic. And I think this is important. It's about being pragmatic. Optimists can wear you out very quickly. So these people, you see them on social media, we see them on LinkedIn, and every morning they're coming up with this nonsense about how the world is wonderful and, get out of bed and fresh start. Nonsense. Because there's only so much of that you can be, because we're not Lego men with smiles painted on our faces. We're normal human beings and we go up and down. And I think who will survive the best are the pragmatists. I don't want to see optimists and I don't want to see negative people and pessimists inside in my world. The optimists will wear you out, because what they think is tomorrow will be okay, tomorrow, and then the next day it'll be tomorrow again. And then, Christmas will be fine. And then it'll be Easter will be fine, and next Christmas. And if things don't get better, eventually they'll get disheartened. The pessimists, well, they're pessimistic from the start, and they don't survive very long either. And this isn't just me giving an opinion because optimists wear me out. This is actually proven academic research on this. The ones that survive are the realists, the pragmatists in the middle, the ones who know, okay, it's going to be rough for a while. I don't know how long it's going to be rough for, and you just have to accept that and go with it. And I think you hope that at the end of the storm, you're going to be still standing. And I think that's the message that needs to go to your staff, is that I don't have all the answers. It's going to be rough. There may be job losses. There may be pay cuts. That's all probably likely. But at the end of the day, I'll do everything I can to make sure that this company survives and that as many of us keep our jobs as possible. That, to me, if my boss said that to me, I would believe and respect that boss, because that's probably what's going to happen, versus a boss who said, don't worry about anything, everything will be fine, I'll get us out of this. And then 6 months later, you're still stuck in the mire. So think about what you're saying to your staff. Are you the optimist, thinking that you're doing the right thing? Or are you the pragmatist and being honest with yourself? Because you have to give them you have to respect them enough that they're not stupid. They can see the world through their own eyes, and you're not going to fool them. The second point is have compassion and respect. What I'm getting by here is understand that they're going to come at you sometimes and they're going to be angry. And you're going to be the focus of their anger because you're their boss. And in the heat of the moment, they may say things that are wrong. They may say things that will upset you. But you know that they don't really mean it. It's just frustration and fear. So having the compassion to sit down, listen to them, take the dig from time to time and accept it. And having the respect to sit down with them and be honest with them and tell them, look, I appreciate where you're coming from, and empathize with them. And I'm not saying for a second be weak, because there's going to be tough decisions to be made. I was running an organization when the last recession hit, and I had to make, I think we had something like 80 staff. And I had to make 11 of them redundant. And it was awful sitting there. But I said to myself, no matter how hard it got, if I didn't do this, all 80 would lose their jobs. So by bringing in 11 redundancies, at least the other 70 or 69 of us kept our positions. And that's what your responsibility is to your company, not to any one individual. But you must respect those that you're giving the worst news to. And that links to the next point, which is doing what's right, not popular. We see this in politics all the time. Politicians do what's popular because it's all about votes. And that's why politics is so messed up sometimes. Whereas what I'd like to see is people doing the right thing. And that means there'll be hard decisions to make. And you may have to leave your friends go. And a lot of us have built up good friendships with our staff. But unfortunately, that has to be put to the side and doing the right thing rather than the popular thing. Because yes, you might say, I won't let anyone go. And then in 3 months' time, the entire company goes and you've let everyone go then. And that's your fault if you can't make those big decisions. And if you can't make those big decisions, you're in the wrong job. So understanding right versus popular. And then finally, am I doing the right thing for the right reasons? This is my simple mantra in every decision I make in business. The first thing I ask, am I doing the right thing? And these are stupid questions really if you look at them in isolation. And it's a simple yes or no answer to both. And the first question is, am I doing the right thing? And you think to yourself, okay, company's in trouble. So take a redundancy scenario, regardless of COVID or not. And you say to yourself, am I doing the right thing by letting people go? Or could I cut costs somewhere else in the company and actually keep people in their jobs? And let's just assume you've cut all you can cut from the overheads, and all you've left is you have to bring the staff overhead down. So yes, you are doing the right thing. Great, tick the box. Now move on to the next question. Am I doing it for the right reasons? So go back to the idea a while ago where you've got 3 members of staff and you have to let 1 go. And you say to yourself, well, I just don't like John because he actually annoys me. Yet John might be the most critical member of staff. Now, if you're letting John go just because you just don't like the person, or because maybe he questioned you once or something like that, and you're keeping Tom and Breda because they just do whatever you tell them to do, then again, you have to step back. That's not the right reason to do it. So if John is the critical one in the business, then the answer to that is, am I making John redundant for the right reasons? No. So if it's a no, you stop and you go back to the start again. However, if both of them are yes, you progress with the decision. Now, the first thing in terms of overcoming the resistance is explain your vision. So again, go back to what I said about blending optimism and pragmatism. When you show what your vision is, and at the moment, our vision isn't this green grass. Our vision is, lads, I just want to come out the other side. I want to see the company survive so that I keep as many jobs as possible. That's all your vision is at the moment. There is no green grass where you're saying, oh, stick with me, we'll come out the other side, we'll make a fortune. That's not the way it is at the moment. The second part is to remain positive. And again, that's what I said about the idea of positive is not, go back to the optimism thing, it's just, I'm doing everything I can. There's no stone I will leave unturned to make us survive. That's what the positivity is. You're not sitting there going, oh, the world is falling down around me, I don't know what I'm going to do. That's not what they want to see. So you have to remain positive and strong. And you need to engage your team. So you need to talk to them about how critical, the ones you've kept maybe at the moment. So you might have put some on a layoff, and that's fine. You need to obviously pick up the phone to them every so often and speak to them and say, are you okay? I'm doing my best. Hopefully we'll get you back. I've had to put some of my staff on layoff personally, and I've had to be honest with them and say, I'll do everything I can to get you back. I can't guarantee it because none of us can. But they can rest assured that I will leave no stone unturned to make sure I get every one of them back into a position as best I can. But the ones that are left behind, you have to show them how important what they're doing now is to the overall mission, which is to get everybody back into work. So sometimes most of us are at this stage of working from home. That may lead to a lack of productivity sometimes. So you need to constantly be checking in and reassuring and reminding people how important what they're doing is to your team. The next thing is you connect people's actions to the strategy. So the strategy of we're going to get out of this, or we're going to try and get out of this, and here's what your job is to make that happen. So that at least they have an emotional attachment to understand I'm important in this, and he needs me or she needs me to do what I need to do to get this company out the other side. Because we're professionals at the end of the day, and we have a professional pride. The next part is correct any misunderstandings. Again, that's the Chinese whispers. Remember something, when you say just because you say something or email something to someone, that doesn't mean they've heard it. I've been in a room where I'm saying something to two people and I know both of them are hearing it in a completely different way. That's because we hear and see the word through our eyes, not their eyes. So when they're listening to you, they're listening to you through their ears, not your ears. So the nuances of what you're saying may be lost. And I know that, and again, I don't want to harp on about redundancy, but it's topical at the moment. When you say the word redundancy to someone, you may as well stop talking because they don't hear anything else after that. Because all they've heard is, James said he's going to make me redundant, or James said I might be made redundant, and that's it. Next thing is stick to the plan. So you have a plan. So I'm sure at this stage, every one of you has some kind of plan as to how your company or your team is going to get through the next 3 to 6 months. If you haven't, you really need to get this done. I built out a plan for the next 9 months to ensure I have the right cash flow in place and the potential capital supports I may need along the way. Who I need at various stages in terms of how many staff I think I'll be able to keep. And I based it on a worst case scenario. So I know that at worst, this is where I'm going to be. And hopefully with a bit of luck, we'll come out the other side in a much more stronger position than the one on my paper at the moment. And finally, diagnose and fix the source of resistance. So go back to that previous slide and look at those things and just think about the people and think about how they're seeing the world. And take the time to spend time with them. Pick up the phone and talk to them. Listen to what they're worried about. You may not want to do it, and it may be emotional at times, but I think you have a responsibility, especially at the moment, because this is nobody's fault. It's not your fault that they're at home picking up this unemployment benefit for the first time in their careers. It's not your fault. Whereas it'd be different if you just decided, I'm just going to make cuts because I want to go a different direction. I can understand why you would pick up a phone then. But this is different, and I think it's important to look after those people, treat them with respect and dignity, come out the other side, and they'll still want to work for you because you will need people and you will need talented people with you. The final slide, which is the reset to zero. So don't wait for this platform. So when we get out of COVID, immediately think about change. What's coming next? Don't wait for the next platform. Look at what you can do with your business. And I think this scenario in the long term will probably end up with far more positives out of it than negatives, because we'll learn how to work far more efficiently. Think about all the times we thought we had to drive to Dublin for a meeting that took an hour and you wasted a day. Now I don't think we'll ever need to be worrying about that anymore. So there will be efficiencies that will come out of it. We will test ourselves in terms of our conceptual ability and our adaptability as a company. And we may surprise ourselves. Forget the halcyon days of the past. You know, when you look back on your childhood and you think, wasn't it lovely? We spent our summers in wheat fields playing football and all that. And the truth was, you know, when you think back on your summers as a kid, it never seemed to rain that much. Well, it bloody well did, because we live in Ireland. So the halcyon days of the past are gone. Don't worry about them. There's nothing you can do about it. Focus on the future. That's all you can control. And that's what the next point is focus on your circle of control. There's no point you sitting in your office worrying about what will Donald Trump say next, because it's irrelevant to you. There's nothing you can do about that. You can't control it. So all you can worry about is your own company and how you behave and act. And then finally, leading is all about people. If you forget that, it's over. You have a responsibility as a team leader and as a boss to look after your staff. That is your responsibility. And when the dust settles, and it will settle, they will remember how you treated them. And even the ones that you end up having to leave go, if it's done in the right way and in a respectful way, I can guarantee you, they will look back on it in the longer term, not in the short term, and they'll think, you know what, he or she wasn't a bad egg, and they looked after me as best they could. So that brings me to the end of my slideshow. I hope you found that useful. I have some questions coming in, so I'll have a look. So the first one, in the past, the company has commenced change processes, consulting with staff and everyone. But once the plan was ready, nothing happened. This is making it a challenge to move change forward now. How would you suggest we overcome? Well, you're kind of answering your own question in that one. You're saying you consulted with staff and everyone, but once the plan was ready, nothing happened. And that goes back to appetite. What I was talking about was, did the boss, or did you, if you were the boss, actually really want to do this? If the boss doesn't want to do it, and if the people in power don't really want to do it, well then it's dead from the start. So that's the first side of it. Look at the appetite for the management of the company. The second thing was, did you really consult, or did you just think you were consulting? And what I mean by that, now I don't want to sound like a consultant when I say this, but what I mean by that is, did you tokenistically send out a questionnaire to them and ask for feedback? Or did you sit down with them and actually listen to what they were really saying? Did you give them a chance to explain their concerns around it? And then finally, is it just laziness on behalf of the management that it didn't get implemented? So, you know, it says, once the plan was ready, nothing happened. That happens all the time, because the bottom line is the day-to-day has to still happen. So you may have a new strategy, and that may mean that 5 or 6 people have new big projects they want to take on and lead, but they still have to do their day-to-day job. Maybe they don't have the resources to take on another big project, or maybe they just don't want to. And then if they're not held accountable for their actions by the person at the top of the organization, it all falls apart and nothing gets done. So that's what you do. So you go back to the start, you make sure the plan is what you need right now in terms of going through COVID. You assign projects to the right people, and you hold them accountable with KPIs. And it's up to the CEO or whoever their direct manager is to hold that person accountable on a monthly basis. Sit down with them and say, well, how's the project coming on? What's been done? What's going to be done next month? And then next month you say, you told me X, Y, and Z to be done. It's not. Why isn't it done? And by doing that and ensuring that there is this culture of accountability within the company, that will change. So I think that's, I have something from the chat, 1 second. Oh, no, sorry, that's you. No, so I think that brings us to the end. So I hope you found it useful. If I can be any assistance, look, please feel free to give me a shout anytime. Brian has my contact details. So Brian, back to you.
Thank you very much, James. And if you do have any more comments or questions, feel free to post them there while we're still online. But thank you very much for taking the time to join us. I do hope you found it worthwhile. And as with the other webinars and that as well, the recording from this one, we'll have it available within the next 24 hours, so you can play back and have a look and that on the details. And I will send the slides out as well, so you can have a look at it at your own time. And you can refer to it as you are implementing or working through change process in your own organization. We look forward to seeing you for some of the future webinars. We've got a few more which we'll be announcing for next week and the week after. In the meantime, stay safe, and thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Thank you very much, James. Appreciate your time and input this afternoon.
Thank you.